to be about meter, and I just want to tell you that I don't normally teach meter, especially to undergraduates, but a couple of you have requested meter. And meter is actually a handy thing to know. I was thinking about this Tuesday night. Actually, one of my graduate students had a poem that was being workshopped, and she said something about the lack of rhythm in the poem. And I had been thinking to myself, this poem does sound a little flat. And so I scanned the lines in her poem. Scanned is where you look at each syllable and you see if the syllable is stressed or not stressed. And what I noticed was that every one of her lines had more unstressed syllables than stressed syllables. And immediately I thought, well, there's the problem. Okay? So this is a really good way to tinker with your poem once you know where things are stressed and unstressed, and give it immediate rhythm by making sure that you have at least as many stressed syllables in a line as you do unstressed. As many as or more than stressed syllables than unstressed. This also forces you to do something that's very difficult, which is to change your syntactical structure of your sentences. Because we all get into a certain pattern when we're writing, in which almost all of our sentences sound just alike. You know, we start the same way, whether it be with a clause or a noun or a verb or an adjective or whatever, and we continue along in the same structure, and all the sentences have about the same number of words approximately. This is a way to force yourself to stop, look at what you're doing, figure out how to make more stressed syllables, and one way to do that is to mess with the syntax of the sentence and to change the structure of the sentence. So this is a really good thing to learn. You might not quite understand meter or how to do it at the end of this, and one of the reasons, of course, is that I'm not going to go into extensive instruction because it can get pretty complex, and there's, I'm sure, entire books written about this. But I'm going to give you a quick and dirty crib sheet, something that will work 90% of the time. Okay? And I do think, in a way, this is important, though, something to think about. You know, like think about orphaned animals. The caretakers put little clocks in there with them, and there's like the beat, boom, boom, boom. And people who study this think it has to do with our heart. Like meter sounds like our heart. It subconsciously affects us. We recognize the sound. There was, when I was your age, this woman was killed in a car crash, and she was pregnant, and I don't know, 3 or 4 months long pregnant, and they hooked her up to life machines that kept her alive for the child's entire time growing, like 6 months. And they did things like put sounds against her womb, they put music against her womb, they put clocks against her womb. They made sure that there was noise going on, because this is something that's important to the fetal development. So this is something to think about, is how it affects us subconsciously. And even if you don't recognize, if you cannot scan a line and, you know, do the stress and unstress, we recognize meter, we recognize the sounds. So for example, in T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, it begins, April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. You know, I might not know what that rhythm is. You might not know that that's trochaic, falling rhythm, 4 beats per line, but you hear it. You hear it, consciously and subconsciously. So it affects the way the poem sounds, it affects the way you hear it. It makes you like the poem more. Okay? So, what I'm going to do then is a very quick crib sheet. Very quick general rules that will work for you 90% of the time, that will make meter very easy. Now, so, very basic. Every syllable is either stressed or unstressed. And stressed means you put more emphasis on that syllable, right? So something, when we're talking, you notice when somebody talks, you notice how they stress certain words. And when you're writing plays, for example, or when you're writing short stories and you need to change up people's dialogue, one thing to think about is how do they talk? Do they stress a lot of words? Do they talk in a very unstressed, passive way? Do they have an inflectionless, robotic type sound to them? You can do that. You can change the dialogue sound by using meter. Right, so every syllable is either stressed or unstressed. The easiest ones to think about are the one-syllable words, stressed or unstressed. Every 2-syllable word, and here we go, already got an exception. 99% of 2-syllable words have one stress and one unstress. So every one syllable word has a stress or an unstress. Every two syllable word has, 99% of the time, has an unstress and a stress. So when you're writing poems, if you shoot mostly for one syllable words, you will very easily figure out quickly whether your poem has your line has more stresses than unstresses. It's when you start going with the two syllable words and three syllable words that it gets more difficult. But if you're writing in a strict meter, which I don't necessarily want you to do, I think more importantly is to make sure you have the concrete images, that you have the assonance and alliteration, that you have the similes, that you have a strong, clear story, or at least a very strong placement and the reader knows what's going on, even if there is no story. All of that is important. After you've done that, is when you start tinkering with things and noticing things like meter. So when you're doing this, one way to knock yourself out of meter, or to force your reader to stress something the way you want them to, is to use a two-syllable word. Robert Frost does this a lot. He writes in a, most of the time, he writes in iambic pentameter, right? So unstress, stress, unstress, stress. You don't want to do, say, more than 2 or 3 lines in strict iambic pentameter. Really, you don't even want to do that many. You do like a line that is mostly iambic pentameter, but with one substitution, one anapest, or one trochee. So one thing that's different. That keeps the reader awake, keeps the reader interested, keeps the energy alive. Okay, so Robert Frost, in order to knock you out of his pattern, will use a two-syllable word. So he'll do something like use a name, Robert, Robert, Robert. The first syllable is stressed. So he'll start a line, he's been starting off the line with unstressed, stress, and the next line is unstressed, stress, and then the third line, stress, unstress. And the way to do that is use a two-syllable word, stress, unstress. Because always with a two-syllable word, always the same syllable is going to be stressed and the same syllable is going to be unstressed, no matter what you do. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, because three-syllable words is where things get a little bit more complicated, where you can force the reader to stress things you don't, that they would not normally do. Okay, but first we'll start with just very basic. Very basic. If you're writing poems, if you choose one-syllable nouns, one-syllable verbs, one-syllable adjectives, those are going to be stressed. Okay, so, where are my stresses? Red, car, tree, rock, path, beam, bridge. Does anybody recognize this poem that I'm pulling these words from? Snake, moon, beam, I said that already. Row, beam, row, train, shook, shed, note. It was the middle of the night and I had lived a long time with that country. With Mount Pisgah, with the hay ricks and rock paths and beam bridge across the snake thick waters. Okay, so do you remember I brought in a line and said there's a good way to expand your poems is to, try to just put more information in a line. So I began with geese fly off, I believe is what it was. Geese fly off, geese fly off, geese, I think that's all stressed. Geese fly off. One way to think about this is just say something out loud and then to exaggerate. So like Robert, Robert, or to do it wrong, Robert. Oh, we're in France, cool. Robert, Robert, Robert. Okay, so exaggerate when you're talking out loud. Oh, that's one way to figure it out. The other way, of course, is to look it up in the dictionary. Dictionary will always tell you what syllables are stressed and unstressed. This is like if you were like me and you grew up with, in a family that didn't talk a lot, or in a family that doesn't have a lot of words, but you read a lot, so you come to words on the page, you don't know how they're pronounced. You have to look them up, or you embarrass yourself in public by mispronouncing words. I've done this a lot of times. I'm sure I still do this. So you look the word up, and the dictionary will tell you how to pronounce it. Now we have something called a computer. Telephone, you can actually say, pronounce Robert, and you'll get 10 websites that all have Robert, 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 over and over again on YouTube. So you have that, but I actually still prefer the dictionary, because you really have to listen closely to the pronunciation to figure out exactly what's being stressed. And this is where we have trouble, right? Those of us who are from different parts of the country, for example, might hear something differently, or might actually pronounce something differently. I'm a Southerner. I know this. Okay, so, but the dictionary does not mislead us, I don't believe. Okay, so the one thing quickly you can do is just look something up. But with something like this line, you know, geese flew off. Geese flew off, and remember I said, well, let's give the reader more information. What time of the day was it? It's just like writing a newspaper article. What is it? What, where, how, who, when? So geese flew off. When? Sunset. Where? Far field. How? Beating their wings, lifting from the ground. Who? Geese. What was the other one? What? Geese. Okay, there we got it covered right there in one line. We got geese lift from the far field in the last light. So I changed sunset to last light. Does it sound odd? It does not sound like it's not ordinary English, but it's a little bit more interesting than sunset, which is what everybody would say. But it also gives me two L's, right? So you got alliteration. Lift, last light. So flew is fine. It's a verb. It's a verb that's stressed. Lift is just slightly different, and it's an L. And you remember when we were talking about the subconscious effects of sounds on us, L is a very liquidy sound. And so if you're around water, you might try to use a lot of L's in your words. And so the geese lift from the far field in the last light. In the next line, they scrape across outers and do something onto a pond and land on a pond somehow. Better word than land. Better verb than land. I don't remember what it was though. So the thing about this though is you know, giving us far field gives us alliteration, giving us last light and lift gives us alliteration. But what's most important for today is these are all one-syllable words, and there's 10 syllables total, and they're stressed. There's a pattern that's not an exact pattern, but there's a definite pattern. Geese lift from the far field in the last light. So there's 6 stresses. Geese lift, far field, last light. 4 unstresses. The, from the, in the. And so there's 10 syllables. There's more stressed syllables than unstressed syllables. And that has a certain subconscious pattern to it. Stress, stress, unstress, unstress. Stress, stress, unstress, unstress. Stress, stress. So there's pattern. It has a good sound to it. Do you see how that worked? I did that very quickly, but you see how that worked? You add information, and then you think about your word choice, what would be stressed, you count your syllables, and then you count your stresses and your unstresses. The thing that, the crib sheet though, the simple thing is, we do not stress unimportant words like of, the, and, to be verbs. We do not stress to be verbs, was, were, be, to. We don't stress a and the. And we stress the important words, the one-syllable noun, the one-syllable verb, the one-syllable adjective. Those are the important words. If you were talking to a friend and you said, come here, quick, look, a bird in the tree, you would not stress in the. You would stress tree, bird, and your friend would say, dude, what? I've seen birds before. But you'd be like, no, this bird is special. Special. And you'd stress special. This bird. And that'd be a chance maybe for you to stress this. This is where things get complicated, where my 90% rule does not work. Shakespeare has shown us this. To be or not to be, that is the question. What do you stress in that? And every time you see that play done by a different actor, different things are stressed. So if you wanted to tell your friend, that bird in the tree, this bird is special, you would stress this. But normally, in just everyday, ordinary English, you would not stress this. If the actor doing Hamlet wanted to stress that the question, to be or not to be, or not to be, that is the question. If he thinks the is important, or that is the question, you know, he's going to stress different syllables, and it's going to change the meaning of the line. But, you know, those of us who aren't Shakespeare, we have trouble getting our readers to do that for us. So we have to choose our words more carefully and be aware that the reader, what is the reader going to stress in natural speech, in ordinary English? And we can trust that the reader will stress one-syllable nouns, verbs, and adjectives, and we can trust that they will not stress the unimportant, the words like of, and a, the, connective words like that. Okay, so that's a quick 90% of the time crib sheet. Now, I can show you poems in which we would stress was of the, Robert Frost does this to us all the time. It's a little bit more complicated, so we're just doing the 90% right now, what will work most of the time. Especially if you're not writing metered poetry, which I would prefer you did not. This is what I just said. Okay, I do not write metered poetry. I write free verse. Yet, hello, computer went off. Oh no, okay. Yeah, that wasn't important. Oh, there you are. Sorry about that, YouTube. You'll be right. I do not write metered poetry, is what I was getting ready to say, right? However, if you scanned my poems, you would find that indeed I do write metered poetry. What's that about? If you scan my poems, you would find that while I am not writing in a strict pattern being, say, iambic pentameter line, in which you have 10 syllables, and the line goes like this: unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress. That's strict iambic pentameter. Yet, as you can see, I do write metered poetry. 10 syllable line, stress, stress, unstress, unstress, stress, stress, unstress, unstress, stress, stress. So what I'm not writing is strict meter. And if writing this line had caused me to sound like I don't speak English as an ordinary language, I would not have done that. I would have changed the stresses. I would do what I needed to do to sound like I'm speaking ordinary English. I just happened to get lucky, right? Good karma today. Okay? So I was able to do ordinary English and something that seems like a nice patterned stress. And if you'll scan like Walt Whitman, free verse poet, look at his poems. He's writing free verse, very obviously free verse, and then like the last 4 lines, iambic pentameter. Boom, 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 boom. Adrienne Rich, one of our more famous contemporary free verse poets. Her first book was very metered, so she knows how to do meter. But her later books, free verse, very obviously free verse. But if you scan her lines, you will notice that oftentimes at the end of the poem, last 2 or 3 lines, boom, iambic pentameter. The same thing with my poems, which are very much free verse poems. But you will look in there and you'll find like anapest lines or iambic lines, because that adds to the rhythm. If I have to get rid of that meter though to make it sound better, to choose a different word that I think is better, I will do so. So it's all, what you're able to do. Can you get it all to come together? Okay? So, but 90% of the time, this is great. This will work for you. Just stress certain words. You don't stress other words. Sometimes it does not work for you. Now, just for your information, words like that have suffixes or prefixes, the suffixes and prefixes are never stressed. Okay, so lovely. Lovely. Love is stressed. Lee is not. Lee was added on to lovely. So lovely. Return. Turn is stressed. Rut is not. So when you have something like running, run is stressed. Ing is not. Because this is just something to help you when you're trying to figure out if something is stressed or not. Okay, so 2-syllable words, people often hang up. They get confused as what's stress and what's not stress. So this is just a quick crib sheet for you. Suffixes, prefixes, almost never stressed. So lovely, beautifully, complexly. I'm just going to sit here and add LYs to a bunch of words. And never, never, never will the LY be stressed. That works 100% of the time. Okay, running, moving, passing, dealing, never, ever, ever will the ing be stressed. Works 100% of the time. Okay? But again, until I still have to look up words. I spent more time on a character bit trying to figure out where to stress mulberry this morning. Mulberry, 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 I think it's one of those and some words, pecan, pecan, pecan. How do you pronounce that word?
Pecan. They say pecan like Georgia, I think.
I was hoping somebody in the room would say pecan. Pecan, sometimes I think it has to do with regional pronunciation. I say pecan because I'm a southerner. Pecan, what is that, Midwest?
I hear it in like deep south.
Okay, deep southerners. Okay, I'm not deep Southern. Deep Southern say pecan, pecan, pecan. Second syllable is stressed in pecan, pecan, first syllable is stressed. So I think it's one of the mulberry might be one of those words that things change up depending on where you're from. I say coyote, and a lot of times people have no idea what I'm saying. How do you pronounce that word?
Coyote.
Oh. How many of you say coyote?
Southwest.
I think that's more west of here, coyote. So maybe when I lived in Utah and California, people were like, what? Nothing, I don't know. This is animal. Okay, so let's say, can you guys write a iambic pentameter line right now out loud? Start with an easy word like the.
I went to town to buy
Sure, wait a minute, let's go.
new shoes.
I went to town to
Buy
buy.
some drugs for you.
Yikes.
I do too. Drugs. But I appreciate the thought.
I appreciated it to fruit, and then we got it. To buy some fruit for you.
Fruit is what I meant.
There we go. Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
Want to see something that's really, I mean, this is bad, right? Hey, relax. The dogs and cats are fighting over special kitty treats and making fur and dander fly. Ah.
I dislike that line.
That was incredibly hard to write. I don't do iambic pentameter, is what I've discovered. So, I do, meter, stress, stress, unstress, unstress, stress, stress, unstress, unstress. I also do anapest. Anapest is my natural rhythm. Unstress, unstress, stress. So I have to be careful about that because that's too many unstresses if you're not careful. Unless you're doing it, in a very obvious pattern, it starts sounding, sleepy. Maybe sad. Maybe it just sounds sad. Anapest. The thing that I've noticed though is like if I'm writing along in my usual syntactical way, which is just pretty much long sentences that have an average syntactical move, average structure. I've noticed that if I stop and use a lot of nouns, that I can really kick myself out of the meter. So like the next example, rocks, caves, lakes, fens, bogs, dens. Elliot, who is that? Do you know who that is?
What was the one?
Do you know who that? Do you know who this is that just wrote that? Rocks, caves, lakes, fens, bogs, dens, and shades of death.
I'm a bad person.
That's okay.
You called him Elliot, so I'm gonna guess T.S. Eliot.
No, it wasn't, but that, Zachary back there. I know it's probably Yates or
What?
Blake or somebody.
Wait, what page is
I
this?
probably should have written that down, shouldn't I?
Yeah, you should have.
Okay, so, but this is a good way to do it. Just fragment your sentences, put in a lot of hard one-syllable nouns, or just change, it will change your rhythm in your sentence very quickly. So I've done this a lot, especially if I'm writing a long poem and I have, I'm doing like exposition, like I'm telling you information, and then I'll stop and I'll just give you a bunch of nouns right in a row. Or a lot of nouns with just a few connective things like shades of death, so that you get a very strong change of rhythm. If this is rocks, caves, lakes, fens, bogs, dens, and change of death, so that's stress, 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 unstress, stress, unstress, stress, stress. That's spondy. You don't need to know this. You can always look this up. It's available in both books and internet, so if we have a zombie apocalypse and there's no internet, you still will have books, so you can look this up. Okay, two syllables like two heavy stresses is spondy. If you wanted to change that into, say, pyrrhic, which is two light stresses, you could do something like rocks, caves, and then the fens, those bogs of death. So and then would be a pyrrhic. Unstress, unstress. Not important. Not terribly important, unless you decide to study this for a living. or really go deeply, complexly into the writing of poetry. What's important is one syllable nouns, one syllable verbs, one syllable adjectives are stressed over 90% of the time. And the little connected words like of, then, and, to be verbs are not stressed. Okay? And what's important is when you write a poem and you've done everything you need to do and you think to yourself, maybe even subconsciously, this does not sound as rhythmical as it could, this does not sound as good as it could, let me scan this line. So you think to yourself, I'm going to scan this line, I'm going to figure out where the stresses and unstresses are, and then I'm going to count my syllables. And let's say I have 14 syllables and I have 5 stresses. That's not enough stresses because you need as many as or more stresses than unstresses. That's what's important. Okay? All right, so, and a lot of people can do this subconsciously. A lot of people just have a natural rhythm. So, and so if you're lucky, you have a natural rhythm. But some of us, we really do have to open up the hood of that car. And we have to figure out what's going on. So, some of us can change the oil and change the gas filter and change the air filter and change the spark plugs and change the distributor cap and change the oil filter and flush out the radiator, but we don't know how to change the transmission. This is the transmission. Meter is transmission. Let's get there. Okay? Boy, that was a long, extended, complicated metaphor I just wrote. It almost worked.
It's Paradise Lost, by the way, I looked it up.
Paradise
You
Lost.
can't expect me to remember all of Paradise.
I kind of do though. It says a lot about you and my respect for you. Paradise Lost. Thank you. I should have known that, really and truly. So this is the place where we talk about how it gets a little bit more complex. Okay, so let's just say that Mr. Wilkinson, a clergyman, walked into the door and I wanted to introduce him. I would say, look, it's Mr. Wilkinson, a clergyman. I would stress wilk and I would stress clergy. I would not stress man. I would not say clergyman, clergyman. I would not say that. I would say clergyman, and I would swallow those last 2 syllables. I would not say Wilkinson, Wilkinson. I would say Wilkinson, and I would swallow those last 2 syllables. That's ordinary speech. But let's say you're writing a poem and you want us to stress those for whatever reason, because you're writing in some type of metered verse. So what you would do is you would give us other lines that are stressed in the pattern that you want us to stress. So for example, a Mr. Wilkinson, a clergyman, has 1 stress on mist, 1 stress on wilk, and 1 stress on clergy. But if it appeared in the context below, the Milky Way fills up the northern sky. Charles Wright wrote this. Not really. It's not published, he just wrote it to show us what meter is. He's a much better writer than this. Doesn't sound like him though. The stars are blotting out my better eye. Mr. Wilkinson, a clergyman. He just forced me to stress those last syllables because the way this is doing. Unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress. Unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress. Unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress, unstressed stress. You put the reader into a pattern. Hey, this is why I don't like metered poetry, because it puts me to sleep. Unless there's substitution. So the next line I would expect, unless you don't want me to fall asleep, I would expect you to start with a stressed syllable. Robert, or we get rid of A, Mr. Wilkinson. Okay? That would knock me out of the pattern. Okay, so, moving right along. So, in ordinary speech, you stress certain words. In poetry, you still stress those words unless you force the reader not to. And that's pretty much completely up to you. But I don't prefer to write in strict, I tell you, I sound like I speak English as a second language when I try to write in strict meter. My poems just don't sound good. They sound stilted. Some people are quite good at writing in meter. I'm not one of those persons, but I am very good at writing a non-pattern meter, like geese live from the far field in the last light. Non-pattern meter, I'm very good at. But strict meter, like I am, unstressed, stress, unstressed, stress, I'm not good at that. I don't sound good. However, I have been known to write a poem in strict meter as a rough draft, and then take it out of that strict meter. So then you have the echo of the meter still in the poem. So I take it out so it sounds like ordinary English. It doesn't sound stilted, but you still have the echo. All right, so, but having meter or having awareness of meter and knowing what your poems are doing, especially knowing if they have more stresses or at least as many stresses per line as unstresses, will give your poems automatic rhythm, make them sound better, and give them a nice sense of flow and balance. So this is something to think about. This is true also for your short stories. Yeah, if you're writing a 20,000 word short story, maybe you're not going to meter the whole thing, but you might want to think about it, say in your first paragraph. How strong are these sentences? What if you went in and made sure that each sentence had a certain number of stresses versus unstresses? Just in the first paragraph, just in a really important scene, and you have an action fight scene, you're going to have more meters, right? You have a nice relaxed exposition scene where you're describing nature. Maybe you don't need to have as many metered stresses, or maybe you need more to make sure the reader doesn't fall asleep with your nature description. I love nature description. Some people don't. But you know, maybe depends what you're doing. If you have the crow fighting, what is it that fights, the raven and the crow that fight with each other? If you have a raven and a crow fighting, maybe you want to have a lot of meter stresses. More short sentences than stresses. Okay, so let's just do this. Do you know which is the accented syllable in garbage?
Garbage.
Garbage.
I don't say garbage.
Garbage. Garbage. Garbage. I sound like the computer. Garbage. Garbage. I sound like I'm French. Garbage.
Big.
Garbage. Garbage. Yeah, that's it. It's stress, unstress. So if I couldn't figure it out, I would just look it up in the dictionary. But the quickest way I figured out how to do it, other than looking it up in the dictionary, is indeed mispronouncing it. Garbage. Just swallow that first syllable. Garbage. Garbage. Swallow the second syllable. Garbage. 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 Yeah, it's the first syllable that's stressed, right? You can hear that when you really exaggerate, right? Okay. Decay.
Decay? Or
Decay. 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 People are wincing. Stop butchering the English language, Professor.
Because DK stands for Donkey Kong, and you kind of do it in a Donkey Kong.
I don't know this Donkey Kong of which you speak. Okay, so what's the correct pronunciation again?
decay.
Decay. So that's not Donkey Kong? Okay, good. All right. Decay. Decay. All right. Lazy. Lazy. Right. Z-E is one of those add-ons. Lazy. 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 I sound like Pepe the Skunk. Pepe Le Pew the Skunk. Lazy. Oh no, lazy. Okay. Because. 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 This is so easy for a Southerner because we swallow our syllables anyway. This is why all of our 5-syllable words become 2-syllable words. All of our 3-syllable words are less 1-syllable words. Like, we don't need those syllables. I like this. So, because, 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 wait, what?
think it's the cause that's stressed.
I think you're right. Because. See, I'm swallowing the book. Because. If I swallowed the cause, it would be something else altogether.
The
Okay.
B might be like a prefix on it, because it may
Because cause
yeah,
is a word. Yes,
they slowly fuse together over time like today.
that could be true.
And therefore it is
English language.
secondary stress, like undue.
Okay, we'll talk about secondary stresses in a minute then.
Zach Googled this last night.
I was a linguistics major first.
Oh.
So, people who've studied music have an easy time with this. People who've studied Latin have an easier time with this. Linguistics majors obviously have an easier time with this. People who've taken Shakespeare classes, if your teacher had you scanning the lines, already know this. I didn't figure this out till I was definitely a graduate student. I'm embarrassed to say, and I have found like books of poetry that I scanned as a graduate student, and I look at it now and go, oh my God, that is so wrong. How did I do that? How did I not know that? That's embarrassing. Okay. So, once you get it, it's easy. Getting it might take a couple of tries, but once you get it, it's easy. It's just second nature. It's like riding a bicycle, right? Okay. Swimming or something of that sort. Yeah, we're getting to one of those secondary stresses here in this next line. Murder. Oh. Murder.
Yeah.
Louder. Rougher. Sadder.
Faster, stronger.
Faster, stronger, lighter. I don't know. These ERs is one of those suffix things, isn't it? Okay, it's murder. You don't say murder. You say murder. So first syllable is stressed. Depict. Depict. Depict or depict?
Depict.
Depict. Is it depict? Stress on the second syllable?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hammer.
Ham.
Hand.
Cowbell.
It's both. No, that's not true at all. I don't understand this at all.
But wait. The professor said that one syllable nouns are stressed, and cowbell is two one syllable nouns stuck together. What do I do?
Cowbell.
Cowbell. I dare you to Google that word and its pronunciation. It's going to sound just like that. Cowbell. Cowbell. So, look it up in the dictionary. First syllable stressed. Don't look it up in the dictionary. Listen to your professor go, hey, it's two nouns. Both are stressed. Or we can do what Zachary just said, and we can do a secondary stress. We can say cow is stressed and bell is almost stressed. All right, now what did I do at the beginning of this class? I said, let's do the 90% rule. Let's do the quick and dirty, easy crib sheet. Stress both of them. We're poets. We make our own rules. Cowbell, two nouns stuck together. Necktie. Heartbreak. I've lost. I can't think of any of the words.
Butterfly. No, that's not a syllable. No.
Butterfly. Wait, what? What is that? Moonstruck.
Tow truck.
Tow truck. Sheetrock.
Shoelace.
Shoelace.
Beatbox.
Beatbox. Boombox. That's what boomers call it.
Top hat.
Top hat. Yeah, I'm stressing all of them. Dictionary disagrees with me. Whatever.
Subjective.
I mean, when I say that my stress, if I'm reading a poem, I'm going to grant you both of those stresses. If you don't want me to, then you'll have to, then, you know, it'll be all right. It'll be okay. We'll all be all
I
right.
had a question earlier. Could you make people know when to stress it by using like italics? Is that a way to,
No.
no?
I mean, yes.
That's a risky move though.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, you can, but you're better off to use meter because italics will seem overdone, like, oh, it's like all caps on Facebook.
Just on the close ones, you know, like cowbell. you got.
No, I just don't want you to do that. I just feel like the editor is going to try to figure out why in the world that's the person who's reading your poem, who's just already read 733 poems that day, and really needs a cup of coffee, is going to be looking at why is cows italicized and bell is not, and it's going to be far too complex for their tired brain.
I didn't say for cowbell. Like
Oh,
that,
okay.
But just like, you know, to be or not to be, you could emphasize which parts. If you italicize the to be, I don't know.
There's like a lot of reasons why poets italicize things, and usually like those options are kind of listed by importance in everyone's mind. So usually italics would mean like dialogue. And if it's not dialogue, then we're gonna go, okay, why else would it be italicized? And then we come up with another reason, like, okay, it means something that was written down. And so I feel like the reasons that you're saying for italicizing would be like lower down the list, and we'd have to go through, the editor would have to go through all of those reasons in their mind first to get to that point, and we don't want the editor to guess that much, or for that long, you know what I mean? Unless it's like really, really obvious.
And I totally agree with that. And honestly, I wouldn't bother to guess that far down. I would say, why is that dialogue? That's weird. And then I would just keep going. I would stop at the most obvious, which is dialogue. Because that's pretty much, we always use italics for dialogue. Yeah. And then I would think that was odd, and then I would move on, and I'd be confused, and then you wouldn't have done what you want me to do with your poems. You can do anything you want to in your poems. They're your poems, right? I'm just, you know, I'm trying to get you to do what I think is best, is going to be the best poem possible for your needs, but also for everyone else's needs. That's why I do the who, what, where, when, how thing, you know, because people want to communicate. We do, we want to communicate, I think. Ultimately, I think we do. Sometimes it doesn't seem that way, I know, but I think we do.
We need to.
Well, we need to, that's a good point. So, destroy.
Stress and stress.
Destroy. 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 I looked this up in the dictionary this morning, and I'm more confused after doing that than I was before. Because they're both stressed.
No.
No, because sometimes the one is stressed and the other one, because they mix, it depends on where you grew up. I'm just telling you, destroy. 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 Yes. No. No. Okay. Okay. I'm not from around here. I'm from somewhere else. You know, linguists can tell where you're from. If you just like say two sentences to them, they can tell. I had someone peg.
Carolina.
I had someone peg exactly what town I grew up in, and I was like, I'm scared. Just from like two sentences.
They said they were a linguist. They were like an NSA agent.
Good point. I'm even more scared now. Thanks.
Your FBI agent.
Okay. All right. So dental.
Dental. Toll.
Yeah.
Toll.
And
Den. Go.
All of the above.
Listen, you said people who did music found this easier. I'm not getting it.
Uh-oh. Must be the teacher then.
No.
What? Try mispronouncing it. Try exaggerating.
Dental. Dental.
dental. The dental hyphen. The
Den-
dental hyphen.
Toll.
The dental hyphen. Dental hygienist?
Try swallowing, try swallowing the syllable.
Bro, I was just walking by the dental hygienist
It
part
is
of the
dead.
engineering
It's
building.
dead.
Okay, it's this.
Is that where that is?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
It's right over there.
you learn something new every day.
how about nugget?
Nug. It's nug.
I think it's dead.
It's the nugget, the baguette.
Try
and
swallowing one syllable and exaggerating the other syllable. Nugget, nugget.
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 Get. Get stress.
Nugget.
Nug.
Nugget. I want me some chicken nuggets.
It's
I want me
nugget.
some chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. I want chicken nuggets. Peloponnese.
What?
What is that?
Peloponnese, the Peloponnesian War?
Where are we here?
Don't know Greek history. Oh, that's not.
I really want to do the word spaghetti.
Peloponnese.
Polo.
I thought it was Peloponnese,
Peloponnese.
but it's not. It's Polo ponies.
Polo ponies. Ah, Peloponnese. Polo ponies. Polo ponies. Peloponnese. Have you ever had like a meet someone and their name is like, for example, I have a friend whose name is Michaela. 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 Okay? How you spell that? Michaela. M-I-C-H-A-E-L. That's how you spell it. Right? Stress the first syllable. Michaela. Michaela. You're all looking at me like you gotta be kidding me. That's how she pronounces it, okay? So we have a graduate, someone applying to the graduate school who I hope comes, because she's a great poet. Her name is spelled the exact same way. She pronounces it Michaela. Oh, you're all nodding your head. Okay, Michaela. So first syllable is stressed here. Here the second syllable is stressed. I used to have a doctor whose name was. I was pronouncing it wrong for a while. Hostelic, I was pronouncing it, but it should have been hostelic. Second syllable stressed. Unstressed, stress, stress, unstressed. Hostelic. When I was a kid, okay, I was very young, back when we had television, I was watching something called Candid Camera. Okay, you guys know what Candid Camera is? And, okay, this was back in the 70s, all right, so this is embarrassing now, but they gave this poor woman who I think lived in probably the Midwest, and she was at a hotel, and they said, we have this huge conference going on, and there's 10,000 people here at this hotel, and they're all from some other country, so they all have these names that are difficult for you, dear Midwesterner. It's 1970s, okay? Just try to remember that, 1970s. So they gave her this long list of names to read out loud. So, you know, they weren't Bob, they weren't Joe, they weren't Greg, they weren't Jolene. And I'm trying to think of female names. Rachel. They weren't what would be ordinary names at the time. They were names, they were very complicated names. So this poor woman, they're filming her reading these names, and she gets to the very bottom of the list, and she gets to this, Candid Camera. And she says, Candide Camera. Because she had gotten to this point where she was trying to like give every name a slightly different accent than she would have normally, a different stress than she would have normally. And so she got here, Candide Camera. Unstressed, stress, Camera. Unstressed, stress, unstressed.
That's how you say it.
Yeah, that wasn't
Candide by.
That's how you say it. That's how you say it wherever this woman was. But it should of course be Candid Camera. Stress, unstressed. Stress, unstressed, unstressed. Although we have learned that we can force a reader to stress that third syllable. Okay.
I have another curveball. My sister's middle name is Deanne, but it's spelled Dean. And so it's just a capital A. And so can you use capital letters in the middle to get that?
That's gonna weird people out.
I know, but I'm just saying.
If you're doing that in like a regular word like because, and you do capital C cause, that's a little strange.
Yeah. You gotta be a artsy fartsy.
You know what, you can do anything you want to, you really can. But the thing, what you need to remember, if you do anything you want to, is that what you mean for it to mean may not necessarily be understood by the person who's reading it. So as long as you can accept that, you know, it's like on my, in my third book, I have a bunch of 14-line poems. And so that's a sonnet, right? And in a sonnet, the last word rhymes, right? So in my poems, the first word rhymes, not the last word. About half the people who read it notice it, about half don't. I have to accept that. In my second book, I have a bunch of 14-line poems. Not really. They're numbered 1 through 14, each section. They're sonnets in my mind, but nobody else who read it saw that. So, you know, as long as you can accept that your reader is not going to get what you want, then you'll be fine. Okay? So we had the quick and dirty meter. Got a good idea anyway.